Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really know how I can follow the amazing speakers we've had already today, but I will do my best to hopefully lift your spirits a bit when I talk about the progress that we've made in Scotland. Can you hear me at the back? Am I loud enough? Yeah, good. So I'm delighted to have been asked by Trevor and the team at MyDeath-MyDecision to speak to you today about how things are progressing in Scotland. And I'm particularly honoured to be speaking at the Doran Lecture because I'm a proud Aberdonian and he was obviously an MP up in Aberdeen. So as Trevor said, my name is Sorcha. I'm the CEO of Edinburgh-based charity Friends at the End. So we actively campaign, as MyDeath-MyDecision do, to see an assisted dying law in Scotland and empower people to have more choice at the end of their lives as well. We offer support to our members and the general public in setting up documents such as powers of attorney and advance directives, which are similar to advance decisions that you have here in England. And we offer a specialist counselling service to those experiencing issues related to the end of life. We also provide our members with a quarterly newsletter and have recently launched a new podcast, which I would urge you to check out wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we've just recorded one with Trevor just this afternoon as well. We work closely with MDMD as part of the Assisted Dying Coalition, as Trevor mentioned, with a view to keeping each other informed of progress at different sides of the border. Like the inimitable Dr. Henry Marsh, I'm also a medical doctor by profession, but unlike Dr. Marsh, I ended my medical career during my junior doctor days, but that's a story for another day. Since then, I've worked in a variety of roles in the third and public sectors and took on the mantle at Friends at the End in June of last year. I would describe my first weeks and months with the charity as a baptism of fire. I was suddenly thrust into the assisted dying debate as Liam MacArthur, Liberal Democrat and MSP for Orkney, had just announced his intention to introduce a private member's bill to the Scottish Parliament which would legalise assisted dying in Scotland. Suddenly the phone was ringing off the hook with journalists looking for personal stories, members wanting to know how they could help and the general public asking for more information. I had to get up to speed with the subject matter very quickly, studying the various terminologies, understanding the complicated political landscape in Scotland, and learning about how assisted dying laws around the world compare and contrast. So what I would like to talk to you about today is how the legislative process works in Scotland, which can be a bit dry, but bear with me, which I hope will give you a rough idea of timelines for the bill progressing through the Parliament, describe in more detail what the proposals that Mr MacArthur is actually bringing forward in his consultation, and explain how you can get involved further. But first of all, let's hear from the man himself. He was sorry not to be able to come here today himself, but Liam's recorded a short video message for you, which I hope will work. No?
Click that one up there.
That one?
Yeah, and then
Put it back to the start.
We're in a position to produce a report.
Here we go.
Hello, I'm Liam MacArthur. I am the Liberal Democrat member of the Scottish Parliament for Orkney, and I'm in the process of bringing forward a bill in the Scottish Parliament to allow for assisted dying for adults with a terminal illness and mental capacity. A consultation on my proposals concluded at the end of last year, and the response, including from many members of MyDeath-MyDecision, has been overwhelming, and I'm very grateful to all those who took the time to submit their views. At the moment we are processing those responses, which is taking a little more time as a result of the record number of responses we've received, but I'm hopeful that we'll be in a position to produce a report on the consultation before the summer recess, with a view then to introducing a bill into the Scottish Parliament, if not before the end of this year, then early in 2023. I believe the consultation backs up what we've seen in polls consistently over the years, that there's strong public support for a change in the law to allow for assisted dying. I see strong growing political support within the Scottish Parliament for a change in the law. I think the current blanket ban is unsustainable. It's leading to too many people facing impossible choices at the end of life, prolonged, often painful and unnecessary painful deaths. We can do much better internationally. We're seeing examples of countries and states changing the law to allow for assisted dying, and that this can be done safely and successfully. We need to get it right in the Scottish context. That's why consultation is so important and why the Parliament will want to robustly scrutinise the proposals I bring forward. But I'm confident that this is a change that we will see during the course of this session of Parliament, and I would encourage all those involved with MyDeath-MyDecision to remain engaged, to continue corresponding with their MSPs, to ensure that the strong public support there is for a change in the law is communicated to my colleagues. As I say, there's strong cross-party support. I'm very grateful for that, and I think that is a signal that at long last we can see a change in the law that is long overdue. So I wish everybody at the conference well. Sorry I can't be there with you, but thank you again for all the support that you've given this attempt to change the law.
It's nice to hear from the man himself, I think. And he's a lovely man, so he's a delight to work with. Let me just get my slideshow back. So I worked really closely with Liam on a number of initiatives, one of them being a medical advisory group, which I'm the secretary of. This group's comprised of a cross-section of prominent healthcare professionals whose role it is to consider the detail of any proposed legislation and advise Liam on how this might work in practice. We're adamant that we get the detail right on this occasion because a bill has fallen twice before, first in 2010 with Margot MacDonald and secondly with Margot, who very sadly passed away before the bill reached the stage 1 vote and was taken over by Patrick Harvey. On both occasions, the bill was defeated at stage 1, which I'll explain more about that process later, at which times MSPs vote on the principle of the bill. Friends at the End also partly funds a research and legal advisor in Liam's office, who's in fact our former CEO, Amanda Ward, who some of you may be aware of. And she has extensive experience in assisted dying legislation and Scots law as a qualified solicitor and having worked in both Margot and then Patrick's offices when they brought their respective bills to the Scottish Parliament. So I want to move now to talk specifically about the legislative process in Scotland because it differs in some key areas from that in Westminster. So this is the boring part, but it's important. So what happens is a member's bill is introduced by an MSP who's not a government minister, and there's a process to be followed before a member's bill can be introduced. So an MSP who wants to introduce a member's bill must first lodge a proposal, which is published on the Parliament's website. And this proposal is a short description of what the bill would do. Normally, the MSP also consults on the proposal, which Liam mentioned in his video. This means publishing a longer explanation of why the MSP thinks the bill is a good idea, and they then encourage people to write to the MSP with their opinions. Then the MSP has to get at least 18 other MSPs from a number of political parties to support that proposal. At this point, the Scottish Government has the chance to stop the MSP's proposal, but only if they promise that they will change the law in much the same way. If enough other MSPs support the proposal and it isn't stopped by the Scottish Government, the MSP is given the right to then introduce a member's bill. It's likely then to take at least a few months to get the bill ready for introduction. So when the bill is introduced, this is when the bill is presented to the Scottish Parliament. And once it's introduced, it follows a 3-stage process. And these stages are the same whether it's a private member's bill or a government bill. So at stage 1, which is the first stage, obviously, the bill is given to a lead committee, which we expect will be the Health and Sport Committee this time. It's usually the committee whose remit most closely relates to the subject of the bill. Other committees can also look at the bill, and these committees will report into the lead committee. The lead committee is responsible for examining a bill. It hears from experts, organisations and members of the public about what the bill would do. It then writes a report about what it has heard and gives its own view of the bill. This stage 1 report usually makes a recommendation about whether the Parliament should support the bill's general principles. And all of this, again, takes a few months. The Parliament then debates the bill and decides whether it should go on to stage 2 or be rejected. And that's where the bill has previously fallen in the past. At stage 2, MSPs can propose changes to a bill, which we call amendments. Any MSP can suggest an amendment. The amendments are debated and decided on at a meeting of the committee, usually the same committee, which we expect will be the Health Committee, and only committee members can vote on amendments at this stage. If any amendments are agreed to at stage 2, a new version of the bill is published, and this is what's considered at stage 3. At this stage, any MSP can propose further amendments to the bill. These are debated and decided on in the debating chamber, and at this stage all MSPs can vote on them. There is then a debate and a vote on whether to pass the bill. If the bill is not passed, it falls and can't become law. But if it is passed, it becomes an act. If the bill is passed, it normally is sent for royal assent after about 4 weeks, and that's when the Queen formally introduces the bill. So I hope you're all still with me. I know that was a bit of a dry section, but I think it's really important to understand all the different stages, to understand really the timeline that's involved in this. It's a complicated and often drawn-out process, but each step is deemed necessary by the Parliament. So where are we now with this process? So Liam lodged his intention to bring forward a bill in June 2021 with a letter signed by those 18 supportive MSPs from across all political parties. He then launched his public consultation in September of last year, which ran for 12 weeks until just before Christmas time. And as he said in his video, the response was unprecedented and has received more responses than any other bill that's ever been introduced in the Scottish Parliament. So there's really a lot of public interest in this bill. The current stage of the bill runs very much under the radar. So Liam and his team, as well as the non-government bills unit, need to process every single consultation response, and there are tens of thousands of them. And then they publish a report on the findings of that consultation. It's difficult to put a timeline on this part of the process because essentially it'll take as long as it takes. The next step in the process, as I outlined earlier, is that Liam needs 18 signatures from MSPs, which we're confident that we will get. Then he'll have permission to introduce a bill and the drafting of the bill will begin. I think it's important to stress as well at the moment that it's a proposed bill. There isn't a bill drafted. So if opponents come to you saying the bill is flawed, the bill is, whatever they mention about the bill, there is no bill. It's not been drafted yet. So that's an easy win there. So what exactly is in Liam's proposal? So the bill is currently entitled the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill. The proposed bill proposes that assisted dying be made available to adults with a terminal illness who have the mental capacity to make the decision for themselves. Now, I'm sure some ears will have pricked up there when I mentioned terminal illness, because I know that MDMD and Friends at the End as well campaign for a more liberal law than this. We believe that too, and want to see the intolerably or unbearably suffering people included, and we do plan to promote an amendment at stage 2 to that effect. So an important point to mention here is the difference between what's proposed in the Meacher bill versus Liam's proposal, because in the Scottish bill proposal, Liam's used a different definition of terminal illness, and there's no time limit on that. And it's what was used in the 2018 Social Security Act, which says, in Scotland, a person is terminally ill if a registered medical practitioner has diagnosed them as having a progressive disease which can reasonably be expected to cause their death. So it's a much wider term than is used in the Meacher bill, which has a 6-month prognosis within its parameters. And the other difference is the inclusion of a High Court judge in the Meacher bill, which hasn't been included in Liam's proposal because we believe it should be with the medical professionals. I couldn't possibly cover all of the parts of the proposal in this presentation, so I just want to run through a few key points with you. If you want to read the consultation, it's still available online on assisteddying.scot, and if anyone can contact me, and I can send you it as well if you don't remember that website. So one of the first jobs that I had to do as part of the medical advisory group was try and put the consultation into some sort of process diagram, which my communications officer Serge helped me to make look a bit prettier for this conference. So this is just the first half of the process. So the first step is the patient declaring their request for an assisted death. The attending doctor would then need to assess that that person is mentally competent, has a terminal illness, has made a decision without pressure and coercion, and been informed about hospital, palliative and other care options. If satisfied that the patient meets these criteria, the patient would then go through the same assessment with a second doctor. The proposal at the moment suggests a 14-day cooling off period before they're able to go through with an assisted death. But this may be shortened in some cases if a patient is deemed to have a short prognosis. And that's one of the questions that Liam has asked in his proposal, is how long should that cooling off period be, if indeed there should be one. The life-ending medication would then be dispensed, taken by the patient, and the death certified and reported to a relevant regulatory body by a doctor. So this is, of course, just a very basic top-line example of how the process might work. And there are a number of questions which were asked in the consultation, and I know a lot of MDMD members contributed to that consultation, so thank you on behalf of Liam for that. And we hope that we'll be able to answer a lot of these questions through the medical advisory group. Questions such as, how can a doctor assess whether a patient has been pressured or coerced? What definition of terminal illness should be used? What kind of doctor will complete the assessments? How long should any waiting period be? What medications should be used? And should it be an existing regulatory body, for example, Public Health Scotland, be used, or should a new one be set up for this process? So these are just a few examples of the questions that Liam and his team plan to have answers to before they even come to drafting a bill, to give it the best possible chance of passing. There is a real feeling of optimism amongst the groups supporting this bill. Meetings with MSPs have been going really well. The general public have shown time and again in public opinion polls, I don't need to tell you that they want this choice. And organisations such as the BMA have changed their position on assisted dying to one of neutrality. The tide really is changing in the debate for assisted dying in this country, and I truly believe that many people will wonder, once a bill has been passed, why they objected in the first place. So all that's left for me to say is thank you to Trevor and his team at MDMD for inviting me to speak today, and thank you all for listening. I really enjoyed the session today. It's been fantastic to hear from everyone, and I hope that if anyone isn't a member of FATE, that you consider joining us as well. Thank you very much.